Hello friends, welcome back to another episode of our ProRevenge. I know it's felt like forever since I've done a ProRevenge, but I'm back. As always, I hope you stay for all the stories and subscribe for future videos. Today's episode is one beautifully written post that involves revenge over cupcakes. Guys, never mess with someone's cupcakes, your world will crash and burn. This story is absolutely incredible, and I hope you stay for the whole story and subscribe for future videos. This story is titled, The Case of the Missing Cupcakes, A Sparky's Tale. We had an older hospital where, over time, we'd been upgrading the CCTV, security door access, and nurse call paging systems. I had been with this company for a few years, but they've been doing all the Sparky work here for over a decade. So we knew the whole place pretty well, the buildings, the people, the staff positions, the job roles, everything. I worked there a lot, so I got to know the drama, politics, and secret affairs too. I led a team in building and maintaining each of the new systems. These systems were chosen because they could all work together to achieve the client's needs and were networked. They were also standalone because government IT doesn't want third-party gear on their systems. We had to install the infrastructure and equipment. I had network hubs all over the place where I could access all 4 of these systems. In summary, I had admin access to 170 cameras, over 520 doors and gates, the security system, and the hospital-wide paging system. That's a lot of power for one guy. On Tuesday, I was sitting at one of my network hubs doing regular testing and maintenance. I had just been checking the CCTV, watching Janine do that lopsided, stumbling walk she does in high heels. I believed I'd done enough continuous work by 10 o'clock in the morning to deserve a treat. That morning, Nancy, a nurse in pediatrics, had brought cupcakes for the ward staff. Nancy had kept 2 individually packaged cupcakes aside for me, clearly labeled with my name, in the staff room fridge. I walked the 5 minutes over to the ward, humming my own "I'm about to have cupcakes" tune. I opened the fridge. No cupcakes. There were maybe 20 still in there in a big, clear Tupperware container, but mine weren't there, not the ones Nancy set aside. Before I lost my mind altogether and flipped that fridge over, I decided I'd better check if something dire had happened. Maybe one of the kids needed these particular cupcakes to stay alive. Maybe these 2 cupcakes saved the planet. Work was forgotten, and an investigation began. I spoke with Nancy first. I asked if she saw that Janine was wearing heels again. We both made some jokes and had a chuckle. Then I brought up the cupcake situation. We went through the whole "they were there before" and checked the fridge so Nancy could confirm my story. It's like she didn't understand that I wouldn't joke about this. We began interviews. No one on the ward was owning up, and we believed them. Someone not on this ward had taken my cupcakes. The pediatric nurses were livid. My team and I wanted answers. Back to the hub I went. A quick audit of the door access revealed that Jerry went into the staff room between the relevant times. Not yet, don't lose your ever-loving mind just yet, do the due diligence. Checking the CCTV, I saw Jerry walking out of the staff room, carrying a bag and wiping his mouth. I rewound, paused, zoomed in, frosting. The hub's rack did nothing wrong, so I stepped back and stared at the wall. The first 8 thoughts got caught by the filter. I calmed down a little and headed back to my nurses. They saw me coming and gathered. Sick kids were an afterthought in this matter. I told them I knew who did it but didn't want to say who just yet. I needed some time to think and asked if we could all keep this hush-hush for now. They said they understood and immediately asked who it was. They are, after all, government staff. I headed back to the hub to continue work. No longer walking 500 miles to eat cupcakes. As I swiped my card across the reader, in that 1 second it took the light to turn from red to green. A plan started to play like a cinematic in my head. It was like my subconscious had known about this day for ages, and was now premiering its devious feature. It screened the permutations, possible flaws, ramifications, so many possibilities. I'm not sure how long I stared at the door, rewinding, pausing, fast-forwarding the plan. It was beautiful, and I promised my brain a cupcake soon. Let's talk about Jerry. Jerry was a general orderly who was supposed to float around the whole hospital, helping any ward and pretty much anyone else when they paged him. He didn't, though. Jerry didn't like walking around. Jerry was lazy and did not like patients. He used to work in the wards but couldn't find one without close supervision or patience, so he moved to day shift general duties. Jerry hated to be made to walk from one end of the hospital to the other, and Jerry hated the swipe cards and the electronic door locks. Some people just don't get technology. Some people just hate change and love to complain about it, while not taking the effort to learn how to work it. While responding to maintenance tickets, I'd had to listen to Jerry whine numerous times about doors for this and other reasons, mostly Cupcakes. I did not like Jerry. Jerry knew my distinctive name, knew what I did there, saw the other 20 cupcakes and ate mine anyway. Yeah, it's time to mess with Jerry. At the hub, I made necessary improvements to my systems. I selected a variety of well-chosen doors, set up auto-paging for different events, created different calendars, and set some automated conditions so everything swapped and changed around. Once I was set up with the program on hold, I went to see Nancy. I needed to give Jerry a chance to own up, even though I was sure he wouldn't. I asked Nancy to page Jerry so she could ask him about the cupcakes. Nancy wasn't surprised it was Jerry and was on board. The other nurses gathered and asked what was happening. I told them that Jerry was about to work off some of that belly. They weren't surprised it was Jerry either and swore secrecy. I walked to the maintenance manager's office while Nancy summoned Jerry. I went into the maintenance manager's office grinning, and all he said was, "What?" with a smile. He knew me. We'd worked together closely for a while. We're mates, and he's seen that look on my face before. I asked him to just print any maintenance tickets generated by Jerry for card, door, gate, or pager issues, but not to action them. I'd pick them up while I was here doing other work and deal with them personally. When I told him about the cupcakes and my plan, he was not only on board, he laughed so hard that he had a coughing fit for about 25 seconds. I headed back to check in with Nancy and found that Jerry had denied all knowledge. What I'd created in my system was a randomized, intermittent program all focused on Jerry's card. A program that would send Jerry's pager a message to go somewhere way on the other side of the complex, seemingly at random times, based on Jerry swiping his card at particular doors. On top of that, sometimes the gate to the staff car park wouldn't work with his card, or his card would stop working completely, making him go get it revalidated, or a siren would sound for a few seconds when he entered certain rooms. I already knew all the staff routines and areas of responsibility. The patients wouldn't be adversely impacted, and Jerry didn't do any work anyway. Back at the hub, I clicked the go button. Week 1, by Friday afternoon, in 4 days, Jerry had raised 18 tickets. I grabbed a stack of paper from the maintenance manager and went to the orderly's office to find Jerry. While I gently fanned the tickets, he listed all the weird things he'd been experiencing. He was explaining how the duty nurses were getting annoyed at his unexpected arrivals when I interrupted him to ask if he'd seen anyone take my cupcakes from the pediatrics fridge on Tuesday. No confession, I'd only had 50 specially selected doors active in the program these past 4 days. That Friday afternoon, at the end of week 1, I clicked the all button and added the other 470 doors. Week 2, by midday Wednesday, there were only 6 tickets raised. I checked the system logs and found out why. In just under 3 days, there had been a mixture of over 85 events, and Jerry didn't have time to log tickets. When I spoke to Jerry that Wednesday, he demanded that I do my damn job and fix this stuff, and asked why I hadn't done it yet. No confession, no apology, time for head games. I told him I'd sorted it out. When I went to check the systems that Wednesday, I stopped the program. On Friday morning, I turned it back on again. Week 3, I let it run Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. I almost felt sorry for him this week when I was talking to him and considered stopping the plan. Then I remembered why I didn't like him so much. He ate my cupcakes. The one thing I haven't mentioned yet is that, standing staring at that door, I already knew that Jerry was in the final stages of disciplinary management. This was the linchpin to the plot of the film that ran through my head. Remember before when I said that I got to know the drama, the politics and affairs too? I knew that one of those disciplinary warnings was for taking people's lunches on 4 occasions, and not because he needed to either. That's the reason the nurses and maintenance manager weren't surprised it was Jerry and were on board. They knew too. Everyone did. That was the reason why he didn't kick up a stink to the manager or confess. I didn't want to get him fired, just make him apologize. Cupcakes are serious business. The program ran Monday and Tuesday. The plan was only ever going to be for a month, or until Jerry confessed and apologized. Before this Tuesday, I'd had a chat with Nancy. I'd asked her if she wouldn't mind a cameo in a little vignette. She understood and agreed. When I was talking to Jerry in the orderly's office, Nancy arrived and handed me a personalized pair of cupcakes that looked and were packaged the exact same as the missing ones a few weeks earlier. As Nancy was walking away, now silent, Jerry looked at the package, to my shirt, then to me. I held up the tickets, mustered my best Adam's Hill and said, "Don't be a dick, mate." He was silent and very angry. I could see he realized that I'd been doing this on purpose. If he made an official complaint, the missing cupcakes would come up, and he'd lose his job. Also, during our chats, he'd heard me say intermittent issues many times. Jerry was angry because he knew he couldn't do a damn thing about it. I walked off to the pediatrics ward, where Nancy and I were going to eat those treats. I hummed my tune the whole way. Loose ends, unfortunately. Jerry was a dick one more time. He got sacked 2 months later for taking more stuff out of the fridge. I felt bad for him as I helped security save the footage to a drive. As I was walking up to pediatrics on that last Tuesday of the plan, I stopped the program and took Jerry's pager number out of it. I had to scrap the program altogether a while later. Some bright hospital spark finally convinced government IT to add the systems to the hospital's internet. Sysadmin are killjoys, maybe rightfully so. Maybe Janine continued to wear the 4-inch heels on and off until she sprained her ankle. There was no show. The real maintenance manager tried bribing me with Jack Daniels after this episode to add certain pager numbers to the program. There's no way I could have done that. He's an evil bastard. We drank the Jack as we didn't watch the non-existent show. Real Nancy totally fancied me. I mean, after all, she's only human. Nancy didn't fancy me. I just wish she did. To the next story. My first car was a 1984 Jeep CJ7, a pretty sweet ride for a dirt-poor teenager in the 90s. I was working midnights at a gas station and loaned it to my brother, who was taking a date to a party. I got a call around 1 a.m. from my brother, who told me that he left the keys in the Jeep and it was stolen. I was devastated. I was still on the phone with my brother when the thieves pulled my Jeep into my gas station to fill up on gas. As luck would have it, the gas gauge on my Jeep was broken and always read empty, and I worked at the only 24-hour gas station in the area. I pressed the silent alarm and proceeded to fill up my Jeep because it was a self-serve station. When the thieves were out of the Jeep and inside grabbing snacks, I saw an opportunity to slip the key out of the ignition and into my pockets. They paid for the gas and argued amongst each other about who had the keys last. The delay was enough for the police to arrive. I had to explain the story to an officer half a dozen times before he understood. The thieves had this stunned look of disbelief on their faces I'll never forget. The cops were belly laughing, telling the story to dispatch. All the while the thieves sat in cuffs in the back of the squad car. The story made most of the major newspapers the following day. Scamming people is unethical and sleazy, especially if it's your job. This story is titled, "Employer Screwed Me Over, I Screwed Him Back with the Help from the FBI." It was the early 1990s, and I worked for a telemarketing company with the initials SMC. I was employed for 2 full days when I came to the conclusion that we were just scamming old people out of their money using grossly unequal methods. I quit after my second day of work. When I received my paycheck, I noticed that I was paid minimum wage instead of the $10 per hour that I was promised when they hired me, so I went back to complain. The office manager told me, "You didn't finish the 90-day probationary period, so you only get minimum wage." They never said anything about a probationary period in training, and I know it wasn't in the contract that I signed upon hire. Yes, I actually read it before signing it. As the office manager opened the door to have me leave, he said, "See ya, wouldn't want to be ya." I was fuming. I called the city offices and discovered that SMC didn't have a business license and reported them. Less than an hour later, I watched as police showed up and told them that they would have to shut down operations until they had a business license. It took them 2 weeks. When they were back in business, I used an elaborate scheme to get myself on their call list and recorded several of their employees trying to sell me their crap. Not only did I report it to a local news station, which ended up being a 2-part story on the scummy company, but I also reported them to the FBI. The owner of the company was one of the 200 people that were arrested in a nationwide sting of dishonest telemarketing companies. The FBI called it Operation Disconnect. See ya, wouldn't want to be ya. What would you do if your employer suddenly paid you in gift certificates to the place that you worked at? This one is titled, "Won't Pay Us? Fine, we'll pay ourselves." This is a little long, sorry about that, but I've been waiting decades to tell this story. I grew up in a small town in the South. Summer jobs were hard to come by unless you wanted to drive an hour away to the city. We had a few mechanics, some gas stations, a general store, and a church on every block. There were a lot of farms around that would hire high school kids, but the summers in the South are hot and humid. The Holy Grail was an indoor job with air conditioning. The summer before my senior year, I thought that my buddies and I, let's call them Fred and Ben, had landed an awesome job at the general store. The owner, who I will call Dickface, needed 3 people to unload trucks and stock shelves in the morning. We had to report to work at 5 a.m., But it was only 3 days a week, and we were done by 10, meaning we had the rest of the day to lay around and fish. Now, there were some red flags that I, being young, did not recognize at the time. The fact that he wrote IOU slips at the end of every week instead of checks was a huge one. He promised to pay us in full at the end of the month. We were kind of pissed that we wouldn't have money to spend, but it was an easy job with good hours, so we kept working, looking forward to that sweet paycheck at the end of the month. The time came, and Dickface told us that at the end of our shift, our paychecks were clipped to our time cards. Ecstatic to be paid, we went in, opened the envelopes, and saw that we'd each been given a $50 gift certificate to the store. This strange and growing mixture of confusion and horror is a set of feelings that I'll always remember. Fred, Ben, and I approached Dickface behind the cash register and tentatively asked when we were really going to get paid. He looked at us like we were the dumbest people he'd ever seen. He said, "That is your pay." We called BS and demanded real checks. He said, "Well, I can't do that. All I can give you is the gift certificate." What happened next was what you'd expect from a couple of pissed-off high school rednecks. Obscenities were shouted, some things were thrown, and Fred kicked over a candy display. We stormed out of there swearing, and I was seeing absolute red. That jerk had just used us as slave labor, taking advantage of some high school kids to get free work for a month. It went without saying that we were thirsty for vengeance. Now, this was a long time ago, like pre-internet, pre-Desert Storm long ago, and we lived in a very rural area, so we couldn't just call some Bureau of Labor or go viral on social media or whatever people think of as revenge these days. There was really no concept of workers' rights or anything like that. We had to handle this ourselves. From then on, we had nightly meetings on a piece of property owned by Fred's dad. There was only one purpose, one subject of discussion: revenge. We all went through the usual options, arson, vandalism, and so on, but in the end, we decided that straight-up theft would be the most reasonable option. We were gypped for a month's work, and for the scales of justice to balance, we needed payment. As I said, this was a long time ago. They had some cameras, but they were poor quality, and there were only a few, one out front, one by the register, and one over by the beer coolers. There were no cameras on the loading dock or in the back room where the beer overstock was stored. There was also an old doorway that was boarded over and sealed with polyurethane at the back of the building, but otherwise unsecured. In other words, our work was cut out for us. We parked in the woods behind the store and watched it for a few nights to see if Dickface had taken any additional security precautions in light of his deception. He hadn't. The closing cashier just locked the front door at 9 p.m. and left. We met up the next night around 2 a.m. The town was dead asleep. We piled into Fred's oversized pickup truck, drove to the store, killed the headlights, and pulled up to the loading dock. My heart had been thudding in my chest the whole drive over, but now a sort of steel calm had come over me. I was hyper-alert, yet calm as the eye of the storm. Our time had come. The wooden door went down with ease when Ben put his shoulder to it. We slipped into the back room, stationed ourselves in a sort of assembly line by the beer stacks, and we unloaded the place. Cases of beer and jugs of wine practically flew out the back into Fred's truck with ruthless efficiency. In the space of maybe less than 20 minutes, we had the back room cleared out. We cleaned out that prick so fast I don't think he would have had time to wet his pants if he somehow caught us, and we would have been done and gone. We pulled the defunct door back into place, threw a tarp over our loot, and drove to the same property where we had held our vengeance meetings. There was a tool shed towards the back behind some pretty thick bush. That's where we decided to put everything. Unloading and carrying all the stuff took considerably longer than snatching it, even with a wheelbarrow, and the sky was starting to shade pink by the time we had it all squared away. Nevertheless, we were able to make it to Fred's house before his parents woke up and got suspicious. The next few days were tense. I saw 2 sheriff's cars parked in front of the store the following day, and felt the bottom drop out of my stomach. We had come up with a cover story and rehearsed it multiple times in case we were questioned, and I expected the cops to come knocking on my door any second, but they never did. I never saw a report on the local news. In hindsight, Dickface probably knew it was us but didn't want it to get out that he had used slave labor in his store. I bet the only reason he called the cops in the first place was so he could file a report and write it off on his taxes. In any case, we had hundreds, maybe even thousands of dollars worth of beer sitting in an old tool shed, and as young Southern boys it would be a bleeding sin to let it go to waste. We started celebrating cautiously at first, but it didn't take long for word to get out that we were a couple of guys who could get their hands on beer. By the end of summer, we were doing bonfires on the property that were absolutely packed with high school kids. We even had some offering to buy the beer from us, and by the beginning of September, we had made back any money that we had lost out on, thanks to Dickface's slavery shenanigans. I think it's safe to say that I lost my virginity thanks to the stolen beer in the shed. It was the best summer of my life. As for Dickface, I never saw or heard from him again. He sold the store a year later to a guy who seemed much nicer. I got another job working there the following summer for actual paychecks. The beer didn't even run out until the start of senior year. The last I saw of it was chugged by Fred at the end of a football game. And see, that we'd each been given a $50 gift certificate to the store? That blows. Hello friends, thanks for tuning into this episode of Reddit ProRevenge. I hope you enjoyed this story today. If you did, please hit that thumbs up button and leave a comment. If you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for future revenge stories. See you in the next one.